How does a man with 800 concubines go from being a Viking warlord to a patriot saint of Ukraine? This is the story of Vladimir the Great and his transformation of Kievan Rus. The Viking Age, a well-known era of history, has become famous for their raids on Western Europe following the collapse of the Roman Empire. Yet, there was another group of Vikings, known as the Rus, who instead ventured east. Instead of conquest like their Western counterparts, they sought to exploit the vast networks of waterways in modern Russia for long-distance trade between Europe and Asia. It was ultimately the Rus that would adopt Orthodox Christianity, and it was they who would become the standard bearers of this religion after it was destroyed in its homeland. Scholars debate the origins of the Rus, with some contending that they were not Vikings at all, but the descendants of Slavic tribes. Sailing their long boats, they journeyed from the eastern coast of Sweden to the mouth of the Neva River, today's St. Petersburg. The Rus faced their first great challenge when they came up against the Khazars, a semi-nomadic group from the eastern steppe. Ital, the capital of Khaganate, was a multi-confessional trading empire, led by a Turkic warrior elite, many of whom were Jewish. Their extensive domains stretches from the Aral Sea to the Carpathian Mountains and from Caucasus to the Upper Volga. Kiev, founded as a cluster of settlements on the Dnieper River, and would come to dominate trade between the Baltic and the splendid city of Constantinople. Over time, the Khazar state weakened, and the Rus became the dominant force in the region. They used their growing military might to free themselves from the obligation of paying tribute to the Khan and assume the role of Byzantium's northern border protector. This arrangement brought them great prosperity through lucrative trade agreements with the Romans. By 883, a Rus prince named Oleg had taken control of the city of Kiev, which would mark the foundation of Kievan Rus. In 945, Oleg's grandson, Sviatoslav, became Grand Prince of Kievan Rus. Under Sviatoslav's superb leadership, the Rus' borders expanded dramatically. Through trade and diplomacy, the pagan Rus were drawn into Christian civilization of the Byzantine Empire. Princess Olga, Sviatoslav's mother, led the way. She had herself baptized in Constantinople, where she cemented a military alliance with the emperor. Sviatoslav was attended to by a woman named Malusha, who was both his housekeeper and his mistress. In the year 958, Malusha gave birth to a son, whom the couple named Vladimir. Vladimir was thought to be close with his grandmother, the Princess Olga. Her attempts to convert her son Sviatoslav were unsuccessful, but she probably did lay the foundation for Vladimir's future conversion. Sviatoslav designed Vladimir as a ruler of Novgorod. He gave the most important city to his legitimate son Yaropolk. After Sviatoslav's death in 972, a war broke out between Yaropolk and his younger brother Oleg. As a result of the fighting, Vladimir was forced to flee Novgorod. He went to the ruler of Norway, Hakon Sigurdsson, and enlisted his support. The next year, he marched this army against Yaropolk. In the year 980, Vladimir took the city of Kiev, where he slew his half-brother Yaropolk and was proclaimed Grand Prince of all Kievan Rus. By this time, Christianity had won many converts among the Rus, but Vladimir had remained a pagan. However, some sources report that he was already interested in using religion to unify his kingdom. The Russian Primary Chronicle, a history of Kievan Rus from around 850 to 1110, reports that in 987, Vladimir sent envoys to study the religions of his neighbors. According to this tradition, it is said that this envoys reported the Muslim Bulgarians that there was no gladness among them, only sorrow and a great stench, and that their religion was undesirable due to its taboo against alcohol and pork. Vladimir immediately rejected this religion, saying drinking is the joy of the Rus. His envoys also consulted with the rabbis Khazar Khaganate. He ultimately rejected their religion because their loss of Jerusalem was evidence of their having been abandoned by God. Lastly, Vladimir considered Christianity. They were then sent to Constantinople, the center of Orthodox Christianity. In the Hagia Sophia, we knew not whether we were in heaven or on earth, they reported on the liturgy in the Basilica. For surely there is no such splendor or beauty anywhere on earth. We cannot describe it to you, we only know that God dwells there among men, for we cannot forget that beauty. It was ultimately the position of Constantinople as the era's central metropolis and the focal point of Byzantium that impressed Vladimir to follow the religion. The Kievan Rus had fought several military campaigns against Byzantium, but Constantinople was ultimately the powerhouse of Europe at that time, making it the center of civilization as far as the Rus were concerned. In 988, having taken the Byzantine town of Chersoneson in Crimea, he boldly negotiated for the hand of the Empress Basil II's sister, Anna. Never had a Greek imperial princess married a barbarian before, as matrimonial offers of French kings and German emperors had been permanently rejected. Vladimir was therefore baptized as Chersonesos, taking the Christian name of Basil as a compliment to his soon-to-be imperial brother-in-law. This sacrament was followed by his wedding with Anna. Returning to Kiev in triumph, he destroyed pagan monuments and established many churches, starting with the splendid Church of the Thais 989. Although the story is apocryphal, Vladimir did convert to Orthodox Christianity, and this has tangible benefits to the Rus. A unified religion could legitimize the Kievan state and expand its authority in its multi-ethnic realm, where various beliefs and pagan cults oppose princely rule. The existence of readably translatable Church Slavonic literature gave the Orthodox Christians an edge over other religions, whose scriptures were not yet in Slavonic. Not all of Vladimir's subjects accepted his policies peacefully, however. Among these were some of his former wives and their sons. Several of these princes rose in armed rebellion, notably Prince Yaroslav of Novgorod. In the course of putting down this revolt, Vladimir died at Berestova, near Kiev on July 15, 1015. Vladimir and his grandmother Olga are honored as the founders of Russian Christianity. After his death, he was immediately hailed by many as a saint and martyr. The various parts of his dismembered body were distributed among the numerous churches and monasteries he had founded and were venerated as relics. Vladimir's fateful decision to adopt Orthodox Christianity in 988 had far-reaching implications for Ukraine and Russia. The Kievan Rus became a bastion of Byzantine Christianity, and centuries later, Russia saw itself as the protector of Orthodox Christians throughout Europe. The influence of Greek culture on Kiev endured long after the Kievan Rus has faded into the history, leaving behind the familiar domes of Orthodox churches, the Cyrillic alphabet, and other religious practices that still characterize Ukraine and Russia. Constantinople became the spiritual capital of Russia, which they called Tsargrad, the imperial city. Through Byzantium, Russia was connected to the broader world of Christendom, becoming conscious of itself as a European nation with a shared faith. In the 12th century, Kievan Rus enjoyed a flourishing economy and culture. Stone churches and cathedrals were being constructed in major towns instead of wooden ones, and monasteries were established. There is no evidence to suggest that any of these towns were in decline prior to the Mongol invasion, and Kiev itself had a population of 40,000 people, surpassing London and rivaling Paris at the start of the 13th century. However, factionalism and the decline of Constantinople's prosperity led to the kingdom's disintegration around the middle of the 11th century. It took another century of declining fortunes to weaken the Kievan Rus enough to make it vulnerable to attack from outsiders. Kiev was sacked in 1169 by another Rus faction, and further devastation came with the Crusades when Constantinople was attacked in 1204, disrupting the Rus trade routes. In 1147, Moscow was founded as a Rus settlement, laying the foundation for Russia as a separate territory from Ukraine. Although this seemed insignificant at the time, it represented the expansion of the Rus project and its eventual fragmentation. The Kievan Rus were ultimately conquered by the Mongol invasions in the 1230s and 1240s, signaling the end of an era. Kievan Rus left an indelible mark on Ukraine and Russian civilization in the realms of religion and culture, and it has become a part of Russia and Ukraine's ancient history that provides these countries with their religion, language, and artistic forms.